welcome everybody to another edition of Flipped History. Our topic today is the political machine and Boss Tweed. And what we're going to discuss here is what happens with these immigrants once they have settled into New York City. Our learning outcomes for today, you should be able to describe the impact political machines had on cities and its inhabitants and explain the different ways a political machine could defraud a city. Now, the political machine itself, we're going to see these things in big cities, San Francisco, Baltimore, and New York. We're going to focus on New York City. It is structured like a pyramid, and it's going to control the activities of that political party. And you can see there on the right-hand side, it's city boss on the top, ward boss, and precinct captains, okay? So it's also going to be heavily influenced by social Darwinism, the survival of the fittest idea. If you can attain that city boss level, then you should deserve to be there. Now, the role of political boss itself. The boss is typically the mayor, not always, but more often than not. They're going to control jobs, and we're not just talking about any jobs. We're talking about municipal jobs. They're also going to control business licenses, so if you want to create a business, you had to go to this person, and influence heavily the court system, especially in New York City. You can see this picture here on the right-hand side. This is Boss Tweed, and he is the one that we're going to focus on as the major political boss of this time period, and really what is going to force a lot of reforms come the early 1900s. Now, the precinct captain and ward bosses, they are generally first or second generation immigrants. They can speak the language of these people, which is going to play in big to these newly inhabitants of New York City. So they're going to help them with not just the naturalization process, but help them in finding jobs if they're having trouble, and finding better housing so they're not in these tenement slum housing that is falling down around them. And all they're really asking for is for their vote. And this is at a time where you didn't have to be a citizen to vote. These changes in the rules are going to come a little bit later. So the corruption in the political machine. They are going to use many things to stay in power in the city. First thing is election fraud. Take a look at this political cartoon here on the right-hand side. There's something odd about these new electronic voting machines. There was a few years ago a lot of questioning about the electronic voting machines in a lot of heavily Republican areas, and that they would only count the votes of the Republicans at that point. So we are still really kind of uncertain how it's going to work with electronic voting. A lot of districts still have the punch card type ballot. We're also going to defraud elections by fake names and multiple votes. And this is kind of where we get the idea of vote early and vote often. And you can see here, this political cartoon here, it says dead vote in Washington State governor's race. So they would use different names, they would use dead people's names, and the idea was to whatever means they could to stay in power. And they could also graft the city. Also, it's known as a kickback or bribe. And really, bribery, it's how things get done, right? The bribery itself is allowing illegal activities to take place. Today, we're not going to see so much of that with the amount of social media that we have. Anything that happens, it's on TMZ or on Twitter within a matter of seconds. And the biggest thing of all, aside from the election fraud and the grafts and the bribery, the police force are basically been hired by these political bosses to prevent the really close scrutiny of a lot of these early watchdog organizations. The fact is, the police force were being underpaid at this point, so they're going to try and get whatever money they can by any means. And if that means taking bribes from these political bosses to turn a blind eye, that's what they're going to do. And now to the Tweed scandal. There's Boss Tweed right there. He's the leader of Tammany Hall, which is the New York City Democratic political machine. He's going to defraud New York City out of millions of dollars. And we're not talking about current millions of dollars. We're talking about late 19th century millions of dollars. He's going to do this through the kickback and graft system. Thomas Nast is going to be the one that is going to really help capture Boss Tweed or help arouse that public outrage to get his capture. One of his most famous political cartoons is this one right here. It's called the Tammany Tiger. And by 1871, because of guys like Thomas Nast and the amount of pressure and public outrage that he has been able to exude, the Tweed ring is going to be broken up. What did Tweed actually do that was so bad? Well, he defrauded New York City out of between $25 and $45 million through kickbacks, which is close to anywhere between $1 and $8 billion today. He is going to defraud the taxpayers out of he's going to be indicted on 120 counts of fraud and corruption, and ultimately he's going to be sentenced to 12 years in prison. That gets reduced. He gets out in a year. He gets arrested again. He then escapes again to Spain, and the only reason that he gets caught in Spain is because of Thomas Nast's political cartoon. So Thomas Nast not only gets him once, he gets him twice. And because of guys like Boss Tweed, nationally, a lot of politicians are going to push for a reforming of the hiring system. Prior to this, we had that spoils or patronage system where jobs were just simply given as favors to those people that were helping these guys get elected. Now what the system that we want to put in place is something called a merit system, where you're going to only hire those people that are most qualified for that job. And the way that they're going to do this is through the Pendleton Civil Service Act in 1883, which is going to authorize a bipartisan commission to make the appointments for those federal jobs based on performance, not based on how much they helped you get elected. And you can kind of see here there's a civil service exam. Applicants that want to get into a federal job are required to take the civil service exam prior to being hired. So a recap again, you should be able to describe the impact political machines had on cities and its inhabitants and explain the different ways a political machine could defraud a city. You have bribery, you have the kickbacks, you have the election fraud. All these things played a big role in defrauding millions of dollars from the taxpayers and from the city, and lining these big politicians' pockets. So if you have any questions, let me know. Send me an email. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.